We're waiting
you're
just
forgiven.
for you, so it's good.
Now that you're here, now that she's here,
Now
we can start. All right. So, and if you didn't get the CLI, there'll be time to do that later. So we're going to talk about how to build and test and deploy a web component with Nutmeg. And we'll talk about what Nutmeg is very soon.
Do you want the clicker?
I want the clicker. This is Abraham.
And this is Pearl.
And we are from
And
what?
collectively, we're Pearlbraham.
We are Pearlbraham. When we work with a colleague named Ashley, then we're
Abra Hurley.
Abra Hurley, yeah. So, but Pearlbraham more often. We are engineers at BendyWorks in Madison, Wisconsin. We're also co-organizers of the Google Developer Group in Madison, Wisconsin. And we're also both Google developer experts in web technologies. So we're basically like short and tall versions of the same person.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. If you would like to follow along with today's slides, you can do that at slides.today.
And that is a real website. It's not, we're just not pulling your leg.
And
it's also a good way. You don't have to take a photo of the resources slide at the end. You can just go to slides.today. You can go there tomorrow even.
Or the day after. The slides will be there. So why web components? Web components are kind of the new hotness, and for good reason. To illustrate the benefits of web components, we're going to do a little bit of role play. Abraham is a product manager, and I am his developer. Oops. I forgot I was manning the slides.
I have a client who has a site that's straight out of the 90s. It's all text. There's no images whatsoever. So we have a new feature spec of we want to show some images to our users. So we bring on Pearl as the developer to implement this and make it happen.
I know how to do that. I can add an image to a website. I add an image tag and point it at an image in the repository, and yay, we have images.
Success.
But
as time goes on, links rot and stop working. And so after a while, our visitors are complaining because they're not seeing the images they want to see. They're seeing broken links instead. So we're going to take this implementation another step and add another feature where every time an image fails to load, we're just going to load in a kitten image instead and just make our visitors all warm and fuzzy inside.
And all right, I can do that. I know how to do that. I'm going to grab some jQuery. I'm going to put an event listener on the image that will listen for errors. And when there's an error on the image, I'm going to swap out the image URL with our fallback image, our kitty URL. And that's great. And everybody's happy.
And this is sweet. We have images of kittens loading everywhere. But the problem is that as too many links stop working, people are only seeing kittens. And we're not Instagram for kittens. We're some other site that I didn't actually say what we did. So we need to have the actual images showing. So we're going to come up with a new spec where every time an image fails to load and we put in a kitten image instead, that we want to report that to a CMS somewhere so our content admins can go and fix up all the broken images and we show the content we're intending to show.
I quit. I found a job that's going to pay me more.
So Pearl's gone. We're going to hire a new developer. This is Ruby.
Hi. I'm Ruby, and I can solve this problem. I'm not really aware of the code that already exists, but so I'm just going to slap another event listener on the images, and I'm going to listen for errors. And when there's an error on an image, I'm going to ping the server, and we're good.
Yeah, this is great. Now we can have our content admins go in and fix up all the old broken links, and our customers are happy because all their visitors are seeing the images they want to see. And so now that everything's pretty much working, we want to make it a little prettier and have all the images fade in and have a, maybe not modern site, but maybe mid 2000s is where we're up to now for our developed site.
Yeah, I quit.
So Ruby's decided to move on, so we're going to hire a new developer, PHP.
Hi, PHP. And I know how to handle this. I can fix it, and I'll fix it like this. I'll create a global function, again with handy jQuery. Then I'll add another event listener, listen for errors, and or not listen for errors, listen for loading, and on load I will fade in the image with a hard-coded 1 second time.
So as long as everybody wants their image to fade in 1 second, then we're fine. Hopefully they don't want to customize that.
Yes, and it's all good. And what do we got?
Lots of spaghetti code.
Spaghetti code. We have bits of code around our code base.
And these are probably all in different JavaScript files all over the place. I would suspect that because we're a cheap shop and we pay as little as possible, that the more junior developers we had probably all loaded a different version of jQuery, so we probably have 5 versions of jQuery loaded.
Loading all of it. Have you guys ever seen code that looks anything like this? Yes. Have you ever written code that looks anything like this? No, never, never.
Never.
Well, I have.
Finally,
but
we found the one person that has never written code like this.
But there is a solution. Web components. So web components is a great alternative to the kind of spaghetti code that we're used to seeing from heavily jQuery dependent websites. So web components allow us to build encapsulated, tidy little packages that have a bit of UI and a bit of logic that goes with that UI, all together in a little reusable package, and that's composable, that can be combined with other components, and that creates a much more maintainable as well as much more testable code.
Yeah.
So
we talked a little bit about why we should have web components, and now we're going to talk a little bit about why maybe you should build them in Nutmeg.
Why, Abraham, should we use Nutmeg, which is a tool that Abraham has built?
The first thing is it's got a great catchphrase of, we think of them as vanilla web components with a little bit of spice.
Like nutmeg, vanilla.
Really?
Get it?
Really great job, Frolis. So some of the things that Nutmeg is trying to bring to the table is, you can build components in almost anything. Some of them are don't leverage the standards very well. So we're trying to use the platform. We implement the custom element standard spec. We have Shadow DOM, kind of what you would expect from a modern web component, as well as if you just do a vanilla web component, there's a lot of edge cases that you might not know about or consider, and so a lot of those best practices are automatically baked in and handled for you. And then testing is just there by default, and it's very easy to use, and it's very easy to publish it on NPM so that other people can use it in their applications, or if they're publishing their own, then you can bring them in and use them in your application.
So it's essentially a custom element, a basic vanilla web component, but with these extra features baked in. It's got.
Do you have a quick question?
I'm gonna ask after the
Okay. Anytime. Questions are fine. So the Nutmeg has 2 main parts: the CLI, and then the Nutmeg seed, which is the parent element that handles a lot of the boilerplate and bakes in the best practices, so that you can just focus on your component and you don't have to focus on getting everything set up.
So this is how you initially get Nutmeg. It's a CLI, so you just install it via NPM or Yarn if you prefer.
And if you haven't installed this yet and you would like to follow along, install it. Do it. Nobody's doing it. Well, that's okay. You don't have to do it.
If only there was a website they could go to tomorrow to figure out how to install it.
What website
Like
is that,
slides.today?
Abraham? Slides.today, yes. All this is available on slides.today. So
Once you have the Nutmeg CLI installed, it gives you a global Nutmeg namespace that has a number of different commands built into it. The primary one that most people will use is new. And this is where you scaffold a base web component that is ready for you to add all your features to.
So it takes the first argument that the new command takes is the name of your component, and like any custom element, it needs to have at least one hyphen in the name. That's how your browser knows that it's dealing with a custom element. After the name of the component, you can specify your properties.
And so these properties is how you define the public API that your web component surfaces to the outside world. And so these will intelligently work as properties or attributes depending on the types they are, and they actually support any kind of valid TypeScript type. So you can put an element or arrays or objects or just about anything.
But for the CLI, these must be valid TypeScript types. So then you run the new command, chugga chugga chugga, Nutmeg does its stuff, and it generates for you a component. And what, Abraham, is in that component?
So out of the box, you get custom elements v1, you get Shadow DOM v1. It has TypeScript, so both your element main source file as well as your tests are all TypeScript, so you get the strong typing. That's awesome.
You get Webpack pre-configured.
You don't have to touch anything
You
about
don't
Webpack.
have to write your Webpack config. It's gonna bundle things and minify and do everything that you need without you having to find the plugins.
I went through all the work of configuring that, so you don't have to.
Thank you.
I think I have a lot more gray hairs now than I used to.
And there's also a test suite. The Karma test runner is set up and ready to go. There's some basic Mocha tests already there based on the properties that you passed in. So it's just basic, but it's a beginning that you can build on as you flesh out your component.
And all the test suites run in headless browsers, so you get a very realistic kind of environment for them to run in.
So in the generated code, in the generated component, probably the file that you'll interact with the most is the component file, and it looks a lot like any custom element. If you've looked at any other custom element, vanilla custom element, it looks very much like that. But there are a few differences.
So we imported a couple of things from the Nutmeg element itself. Seed and property. Seed is kind of a super class that will get you some default behavior that's best practices. And then we also have we pull in some APIs via Nutmeg from lit.html, which is a neat little templating library from the Polymer team in their labs project.
It's a pretty cool templating library that really leverages just JavaScript template literals, and it's very, very lightweight, easy to use.
And so then we get to the actual kind of class itself, where you will write all of your different functionality. You can see here it's extending seed. That gives it some awesomeness just kind of out of the box. For example, here in the constructor, Nutmeg will automatically attach a shadow DOM so that all of your JavaScript and HTML and styling is scoped from the outside world and is generally safe from being influenced in ways that you don't want it to be.
And that's one of the little bits of boilerplate code that you don't need to write, that's already there for you. There are also something that's a little different than a totally vanilla custom element, or property decorators. And these are just handy helpers that create getters and setters for your primitive type properties. And they also handle rendering and re-rendering these properties in the DOM when the properties are set or when they're changed. So this is just some sugar or some spice that saves you a little time.
And one of the other perks that you'll get out of these property values is that it intelligently knows the types that it's getting and setting, and so if you get something that's a Boolean value, it'll correctly render that Boolean attribute to the DOM. And then connected callback and disconnected callback are part of the standard web component lifecycles. By default, you don't have to do anything here. Nutmeg will handle a bunch of weird edge cases that are really difficult to track down and figure out why they're happening.
But these methods are exposed in case you want to do something with them. But again, you don't. This is just there that you can leave it alone, or if it suits your purpose for your particular component, you can modify. And same deal with these methods. The observed attributes, the attribute callback changed, and the observed attributes are part of the custom element standard. And again, these are exposed to you to modify if you want, but you don't have to. You can just leave them alone if you don't need to change anything.
And part of the reason that these four methods we just showed are in the code that's generated and visible to you as a developer is that they're important parts of the web component cycle, and we don't want to hide the kind of standard behavior of a web component. We just want to enhance it some and make it better.
Yes. And here, this is perhaps the most important part and the part of the code that you might interact with the most. This is the template. So the Nutmeg generates two templates: a styles template, which is where you have your CSS, and then your template, your HTML template. And you'll notice that both of these functions return a template result. That again, that's a type that is defined in lit HTML, and you can see the HTML tag before the ticks. So this is a tag template literal, and again, that's how lit HTML handles templating. Anything else? Oh, and the variable, the task, is the task that gets passed in on the. Have we done our?
We talked about properties.
Okay, so that's just a property that gets passed in and then reflected automatically into the component.
And then kind of the key little final bit that you have to have is where you tell the browser, hey, if you see HTML tags with this name, hand all the behavior off to the implementation that we say. So
this is a little simple line that's very crucial. If nothing is happening, you might have forgotten to put it in.
Or you might have deleted it because it's there by default.
Oh, yes.
So out of the box, you get a bunch of kind of edge cases and default behavior just handled for you. So intelligent re-rendering, attribute reflection when it makes sense. There's also, if you are doing kind of like server rendered web components and you have a complex JSON blob, you can stick that into an attribute and it'll intelligently deserialize that when it initializes an encapsulation.
Yes, so all that is built in for you. So now we have a component. If you've followed along, you have generated a basic component with your whatever properties you have put on it. And so let's take a look. If you want to look at your component, run npm run serve. Now this is the Nutmeg CLI has added scripts to the package JSON. So at this point, you can just run the commands right from npm.
And one of the nice things that the server will do is it'll actually run a dev server that will live reload as you're changing your code, so you don't even have to like close it or refresh the page. That'll just happen automatically.
And ta-da! We have a component.
It doesn't do much.
The end. No. Yeah. No. So we have a base component now that will render in the browser. When you run npm serve, it will spin up a browser and show you some demos of the component that you've just made. But this isn't the component that we want.
Wait, you mean we want some real functionality?
We want a component that will actually do something and that looks a little better than this. In fact, the component that we want to make, our to-do component, should look something like this. It should have a checkbox that indicates whether or not the task is done. It should have a task, and then it should.
We probably should have made this a GIF so that the second one becomes checked as we were presenting.
I'm okay with not having a lot of GIFs in our presentation. and we also want the date to display in a friendly, readable way. So this is what we want. So what do we do? How do we get from that to this?
Well, obviously, we'll write a test first.
Yes, because we're good developers, we
Write a test.
We write a test.
Because testing is built in and it's actually very easy.
Yes.
And basically what we're going to say is that we want the text of the component, if a task is due in 7 days, we want the component to render the text in 7 days.
And so our component, we didn't, we have not specified this. We'll specify it in our README, that we're expecting the date to be passed in a year, month, day string. So it's presumably that comes into the component. So for the test, we know from experience that if we're doing anything with dates, we want to use moment because we don't want to mess with JavaScript dates. So we're going to import moment and set it up again to display the date the way we want to. And then we're going to run this test.
And right now it'll just fail because we haven't written the functionality for that, but it's very easy to run your tests.
So we'll run the test.
And once you get that failing test, you can then go in and start playing around with the actual implementation. I just realized there's a mouse right in the middle of that screen.
So now...
Sorry, we screwed it up, so we have to start over because that mouse was in the way.
I'm Abraham. No, this is... it all gets confusing. So in the code, much like in the test, we're going to import moment, and moment exports TypeScript types. So this is very easy to do. If you are importing a library that doesn't export TypeScript types, you can probably find a type on npm that will work.
And basically, like, this simple implementation is if there's a due date, then we're just going to convert it to a string that's from now. So in 7 days, in 3 months, in whatever.
Yes.
Pretty simple.
And then we're going to put it in our template. So we define this due relative variable, and now we're sticking it in our template. And if we were to run the tests right now, our test would pass. Yay!
Would they?
Well, we have actually. They do. They did promise me. We've
actually
done this.
We have actually written this code and run it, and it does work.
We're not presenting you with just made up code. This is.
I mean, on a theoretical level, isn't all code made up?
All right, I'm going to ignore him. So the other things that are in this template, so the task is just the string that was passed in on the element. So that just gets directly reflected in the DOM. The checkbox for we passed in a Boolean element called done, but to display that we need to do a little bit of extra templating. So we create this method, this checkbox method that's gonna add to the template either a checked or an unchecked box. And this is it would be nice if we could just have less repetition, but the way that checked works, we can't, if we said checked equals false, then
it's actually checked.
Then it would be represented as true. So
there's actually an open bug on lit.html to handle this properly, but it's not implemented yet.
So for right now, this is how we need to handle that situation. But then that's it. We're done. So we have a working element that is a list, a to-do list item. Our lives are now organized. Everything is good, and we can now publish it. If we run npm publish, it will get published as a package to npm. Now the one caveat is you need to have an account on npm. And in our resources, we've got a link to a page that just shows you how to sign up with npm. But if you already have npm packages, if you already have an account, all you need to do at this point is run npm publish, and it's a public.
And maybe change the package name because to do is already a taken package name. But
yes, forgot about that.
There's a little fine print sometimes.
Yes, but maybe you don't want to actually. Maybe you're not quite ready to make it public. You can just run build, and the build command is actually run behind the scenes when you run publish. But if you just want to build it for your personal use, you can certainly do that, and that will generate. Well, what will build generate?
My Perl, I'm glad you asked. It'll generate an ES module version. That's the to-do.js. It'll use Webpack to also build a bundled version that has all the dependencies. And then there's also a minified version where it's that build, the bundled version with all the dependencies and minified for a more production-ready version.
So you've run build, and now you can use your component. So you throw a script tag on the page, and you can include your component either from, if you've published it to NPM, you can include the URL from unpackage, or if you have it locally, you can include it this way. So any way about it, include it in your script tag.
And then you can throw an HTML tag on your page, and that functionality will just work.
Yes.
Oh, I guess we forgot to mention, on some browsers you may have to load a polyfill first.
Oh, yes.
Web components and shadow DOMs are not supported in all browsers yet, although Firefox Nightly just enabled web components by default, so that'll be soon.
And in the index page, in your demo page that is generated automatically with your component, there is a polyfill in that you can, and a note about what it is and how you can use it if you need to. Yay! We have a web component, and that's it. So you can build, test, and publish a web component with Nutmeg in a very, very small amount of time.
You can go to nutmeg.tools to learn more. There's a newly updated README that's pretty much better than it used to be, and we have links here to lots of good stuff. Learning about web components, lit HTML, Typescript. There's a lot of this is maybe new technology to you, and so some individual parts may take a little learning, but it's a really neat package once it's all wrapped together.
And again, slides.today has all these links, so you don't need to write them all down, and you probably can't read them from where you're sitting. We work for a company called Bendyworks. If you would like to make web components and would like some help with that, we would love to work with you. And we love talking about web components and learning new things. So please keep in touch. Our infos are right here, and again, you can.
Our deets. Our
deets are here, and you can find those deets again on slides.today. Questions?
Any reason to use Nutmeg versus Polymer?
Well,
NPM.
Yeah, with Polymer you have to use. So Polymer, I like Polymer a lot, but it's in a weird state right now, in that Polymer 3 hasn't come out, and you have to use Bower, and you probably have other NPM dependencies, and I find that annoying to have both Bower and NPM. Also, and if you want you should definitely use Polymer if you want their UI stuff, because they have this material design UI components that are just ready-made, and I think they're great and beautiful. If you want something, Nutmeg is much lighter weight than that, and either, I think they're both great things, and it depends on what your needs are.
And I think they're like Nutmeg is targeting the specific use case of you want to build, test, and publish an independent web component that you load by itself. Polymer, Stencil, a bunch of these other tools are fantastic at kind of building larger sites where you have many components built with that tool. And so we're kind of targeting different use cases.
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with like extending a web component that you already have? Like the functionality of the base web component?
Well, certainly with Nutmeg, the base component is pretty minimal, and it's always the same. And like any other custom element, you can extend it as much as you want, and you can, combine components with each other, and you can Yeah, we did, there is the slot in the Shadow DOM option is available. We didn't illustrate that, but the demos will show you how that's implemented. So yeah, there's a lot. I think that web components are kind of exciting right now. There's a lot of people working on frameworks and tools, and there are new standards that are you know, becoming supported in more and more browsers. So it may be that at some time, you know, all of these tools become obsolete, and that would be fine and great.
And that's especially like one of the goals of Polymer is they're trying to use the platform, and one of the reasons why they went in hard on Bower a long time ago, and they've been slowly moving away from that, and now they're moving towards ES modules. But that's still a kind of a slow transition, and there's going to have to move away from those polyfills.
Yeah.
But it's nice. It's nice when you have stuff that's built on polyfills, and then you slowly remove those polyfills because the functionality starts getting shipped in all the browsers.
And Polymer made the wrong wager on HTML imports, which we know now are not going to be supported. So that's one thing. And they're still using HTML imports. I'm working on a Polymer 2 project right now, and creating the HTML imports, I feel a little dirty. You know, it's not real fun to work with that. But again, that will go away with Polymer 3.
That will Webpack plugin.
Yeah.
There's a tool for everything.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming, and enjoy the last couple sessions of the conference.
Thank you.